Have you ever wondered why some gardeners harvest baskets overflowing with healthy vegetables year after year while others struggle with weak plants despite buying expensive fertilizers? The answer often isn't hidden inside a bag from the garden center. It's sitting in kitchen bins, under fallen leaves, and scattered across the yard every single day. Every year, millions of tons of organic material are thrown away as waste, even though much of it could become one of the richest and most valuable soil amendments nature has ever created. One of the biggest mistakes beginners make is believing that compost is simply a pile of rotting scraps. In reality, outstanding compost is the result of understanding how nature recycles life. Once you understand that process, you can create dark, crumbly compost that improves soil, feeds plants naturally, and reduces household waste at the same time. If you've ever thought composting looked complicated, smelled terrible, or required expensive equipment, you're in for a pleasant surprise. Composting is actually one of the oldest and most reliable gardening practices in the world. Forests have been making compost long before humans planted their first gardens. Every autumn, leaves fall to the ground. Tiny organisms begin breaking them apart. Rain, air, fungi, insects, bacteria, and earthworms all play their part. Over time, those leaves disappear and become rich organic matter that feeds the next generation of plants. A home compost pile simply recreates that same natural process in a controlled way. Understanding this natural cycle is the key to successful composting. Instead of thinking about waste, think about ingredients. Every peel from a carrot, every handful of dry leaves, every cup of used coffee grounds is another ingredient contributing to a living system filled with billions of microscopic workers. These organisms don't need chemical additives or secret recipes. They simply need the right environment. So what exactly is compost? Compost is decomposed organic matter that has been transformed by microorganisms into a stable, dark material rich in organic compounds. Unlike fresh plant material, finished compost no longer resembles the ingredients that created it. Banana peels, lettuce leaves, grass clippings, and fallen leaves gradually lose their original appearance until they become a uniform, earthy material with a pleasant smell similar to a forest after rain. This transformation happens because countless living organisms begin feeding on organic material. The first workers are bacteria. Although invisible to the naked eye, bacteria perform much of the heavy lifting during composting. They multiply rapidly whenever moisture, oxygen, and food are available. As they consume sugars, proteins, and other compounds, they generate heat. That heat is one reason an active compost pile can become surprisingly warm inside. Fungi join the process as well. Unlike many bacteria, fungi excel at breaking down tougher materials like wood chips, stems, bark, and dry leaves. Their thread-like structures spread throughout the pile, reaching materials that bacteria alone cannot easily digest. Together, bacteria and fungi work as an incredibly efficient recycling team. Larger organisms also contribute. Beetles, mites, springtails, millipedes, and many other tiny creatures chew larger pieces into smaller ones, creating more surface area for microorganisms to attack. Earthworms become especially important during the later stages of decomposition, consuming partially broken down material and producing nutrient-rich castings that improve soil structure even further. Perhaps the most overlooked ingredient in compost isn't a material at all. It's oxygen. Many people assume decomposition happens simply because materials sit together for a long time. While that can happen, the healthiest compost depends on aerobic decomposition, meaning decomposition that occurs in the presence of oxygen. Aerobic microorganisms work efficiently, generate heat, and produce very little odor. Without enough oxygen, different organisms take over. These anaerobic microbes work much more slowly and often create unpleasant smells that many people mistakenly believe are normal for compost. That's why successful compost isn't just about what you add. It's also about how you build and maintain the pile. One of the most important concepts every gardener should understand is the balance between green materials and brown materials. These names don't actually describe color. Instead, they describe nutrient content. Green materials are rich in nitrogen. They include fresh grass clippings, vegetable scraps, fruit peels, coffee grounds, fresh garden trimmings, tea leaves, and recently pulled weeds that haven't gone to seed. Nitrogen fuels rapid microbial growth, allowing bacteria to multiply and reproduce quickly. Brown materials are rich in carbon. Dry leaves, straw, shredded cardboard, shredded newspaper. Without glossy coatings, untreated wood chips, small twigs, paper towels free from chemical cleaners, and sawdust from untreated would all belong in this category. Carbon serves as the primary energy source that microorganisms use while breaking down organic matter. Think of green materials as protein and brown materials as carbohydrates for your microscopic workforce. Too much nitrogen without enough carbon often creates a wet, smelly pile. Too much carbon without sufficient nitrogen slows decomposition dramatically because microorganisms lack the nutrients they need to reproduce efficiently. Experienced gardeners rarely measure every ingredient precisely. Instead, they build compost by observing balance. A layer of fresh grass may be followed by a generous layer of dry leaves. Kitchen scraps are often covered with shredded cardboard or straw. Each addition helps maintain the right conditions for steady decomposition. Here's a practical tip that many successful composters use throughout the year. Whenever you collect kitchen scraps, save dry leaves, shredded paper, or torn cardboard nearby. Every time fresh materials are added, immediately cover them with a layer of dry carbon-rich material. This simple habit reduces odors, discourages flies, improves airflow, and creates a healthier compost pile from the very beginning. Now that you understand the living science behind composting, the next step is knowing exactly which everyday materials belong in your compost pile, which ones should always stay out, and why. Making those choices can dramatically affect both the speed and quality of the finished compost. Once you begin looking around your home with compost in mind, you'll quickly realize just how many everyday materials can become valuable ingredients instead of garbage. A surprising amount of what leaves the kitchen and garden each week can be transformed into rich organic matter that feeds the soil for months or even years. Let's start with the kitchen. Vegetable scraps are among the best compost ingredients available. Carrot tops, potato peels, lettuce leaves, broccoli stems, cucumber ends, onion skins, celery pieces, and wilted salad greens all decompose readily. Fruit scraps are equally useful, including apple cores, banana peels, melon rinds, citrus peels in moderate amounts, grape stems, and berry leftovers. These materials provide moisture along with valuable nutrients that microorganisms eagerly consume. Used coffee grounds are another excellent addition. Despite their dark appearance, coffee grounds are considered a green material because they contain significant amounts of nitrogen. They also help improve the texture of compost when mixed with dry materials. Paper coffee filters can usually be composted as well, provided they are unbleached or free from synthetic coatings. Tea leaves and many paper tea bags can also go into compost. However, it's worth checking whether tea bags contain plastic fibers. Some modern tea bags include synthetic materials that do not break down completely. Loose tea leaves are always a safe choice. Eggshells often generate questions. While they decompose slowly, crushed eggshells are perfectly suitable for composting. Breaking them into small pieces speeds decomposition and helps distribute them more evenly throughout the finished compost. Although eggshells contain calcium, it's important not to think of them as a quick fertilizer. Their value comes gradually as the compost matures and enriches the soil over time. Garden waste supplies many of the ingredients needed to build a healthy compost pile. Fresh grass. Clippings provide abundant nitrogen but should never be piled in thick layers by themselves. Large piles of grass quickly become compacted, limiting airflow and creating unpleasant odors. Mixing. Grass with dry leaves or straw prevents this problem and keeps oxygen moving through the pile. Dry autumn leaves are often called the gardener's gold. Instead of bagging them for disposal, save them whenever possible. Leaves supply large amounts of carbon and create excellent structure inside the compost pile. Shredding them with a lawn mower before composting speeds decomposition considerably because smaller pieces expose more surface area for microorganisms. Straw also makes an excellent brown material. Unlike hay, which may contain many seeds, clean straw usually contributes fewer weed problems. It helps create air pockets that improve oxygen flow while absorbing excess moisture from wet kitchen scraps. Shredded cardboard is another surprisingly valuable resource. Plain brown cardboard without glossy coatings, heavy inks, or plastic layers decomposes well after being torn or shredded into smaller pieces. The same applies to plain paper, paper towels used with food, paper napkins free from cleaning chemicals, and non-glossy newspaper printed with modern soy-based inks. Small amounts of untreated sawdust and wood shavings may also be composted. Because these materials contain large amounts of carbon, they should always be balanced with nitrogen-rich ingredients. Adding excessive quantities at once can significantly slow decomposition. Garden prunings, spent annual flowers, faded vegetable plants that remained healthy, and soft stems all belong in the compost pile. Larger branches should either be chipped or broken into smaller pieces because thick woody materials decompose very slowly. While many materials are safe to compost, others should never be included in a typical home compost pile. Understanding these exclusions prevents disappointment and avoids attracting unwanted visitors. Meat, poultry, fish, bones, and dairy products should stay out of most backyard compost systems. These materials often create strong odors as they decompose and can attract rodents, raccoons, stray animals, and flies. They also require higher composting temperatures than many home piles consistently achieve. Cooking oils, grease, butter, and fatty foods present similar problems. Oils coat organic materials, limiting oxygen movement and slowing microbial activity. They also encourage unpleasant smells. If added regularly, pet waste from dogs and cats should never enter compost intended for vegetable gardens. Such waste can contain parasites and harmful microorganisms that ordinary home compost piles may not destroy completely. Composting systems specifically designed for pet waste exist, but they require different management and should remain separate from compost used around edible crops. Plants showing signs of disease deserve caution as well. If your tomato vines suffered from severe fungal disease or your squash plants were heavily infected, adding them to a cool compost pile may allow disease organisms to survive. Unless you're maintaining a properly managed hot compost system that reaches temperatures capable of reducing many plant pathogens, it's generally safer to dispose of diseased plant material through local yard waste collection or other recommended methods. Weeds also require careful attention. Young weeds without flowers or mature seeds usually compost well. However, invasive weeds with developed seed heads or aggressive underground roots may survive incomplete composting and spread throughout the garden once finished compost is applied. Chemically treated wood, painted lumber, glossy magazines, heavily coated cardboard, plastic coated paper products, synthetic fabrics, and non-biodegradable materials should never become part of compost. These items either fail to decompose properly or may introduce unwanted contaminants. Here's another practical lesson from experienced gardeners. When you're uncertain about a material, ask yourself one simple question: would this naturally break down on a healthy forest floor without leaving harmful residues? If the answer is yes, it probably belongs in compost. If the answer is no, it's usually better kept out. Now that you know exactly what belongs inside a compost pile and what should remain outside, the next question becomes equally important. There isn't just one way to compost. Different gardens, climates, and lifestyles call for different composting methods, and choosing the right system can make the entire process easier, faster, and far more enjoyable. Choosing the right composting method begins with understanding your own situation. A large backyard with plenty of space offers different possibilities than a small suburban garden or a compact urban yard. Fortunately, there is no single correct way to compost. Every successful method follows the same biological principles while adapting them to different spaces, climates, and gardening goals. The traditional compost pile remains one of the simplest and most effective systems. Organic materials are stacked directly on bare soil, allowing beneficial organisms and earthworms to move freely into the pile. This approach is inexpensive, easy to expand, and well suited to gardeners who generate significant amounts of leaves, grass clippings, and garden waste. Compost bins provide a neater appearance while helping retain heat and moisture. They are especially useful in neighborhoods where appearance matters or where strong winds might scatter loose materials. Tumbling composters make turning easier because the container rotates quickly, mixing ingredients and introducing fresh oxygen. They work particularly well for households producing moderate amounts of kitchen scraps, although their limited size means larger gardens may still require additional composting space. Some gardeners prefer trench composting. Instead of building a pile, kitchen scraps are buried directly in shallow trenches between future planting rows. Soil microorganisms gradually decompose the buried material exactly where future roots will grow. Sheet composting follows a similar idea by spreading organic matter across the soil surface and allowing it to decompose in place beneath mulch. Another important distinction is hot composting versus cold composting. Hot composting aims to create ideal conditions for rapid microbial activity. A properly built pile containing a balanced mixture of greens and browns, adequate moisture, sufficient oxygen, and enough overall volume can reach temperatures between about 130 and 160 degrees Fahrenheit, or roughly 55 to 70 degrees Celsius. At these temperatures, decomposition speeds up dramatically, many weed seeds lose viability, and numerous plant pathogens are reduced. However, hot compost requires regular monitoring and turning to maintain those favorable conditions. Cold composting is much simpler. Materials are gradually added over time, and nature proceeds at its own pace. The process may take many months or even more than a year, but it requires far less effort. Many experienced gardeners happily use cold compost because patience often produces excellent results. Regardless of the method, moisture remains one of the most important factors. Compost microorganisms need water to survive, but they also need air. The ideal moisture level is often described with a memorable comparison. Finished compost should feel like a wrung-out sponge. If you squeeze a handful, it should feel damp but should not drip water. If the pile becomes too dry, microbial activity slows dramatically. If it becomes waterlogged, oxygen disappears, and unpleasant anaerobic conditions develop. Rainfall naturally affects moisture levels. During wet seasons, covering the compost pile with a breathable top can prevent excessive saturation while still allowing some airflow. During hot, dry weather, occasional watering may be necessary. Rather than soaking the pile all at once, experienced composters add water gradually while turning materials to distribute moisture evenly. Aeration is equally essential. Every time the pile is turned, fresh oxygen enters, allowing aerobic microorganisms to continue working efficiently. A hot compost pile is often turned every 1 to 2 weeks, or whenever the center begins cooling after an initial heating period. Cold compost piles require much less frequent turning, although occasional mixing still improves decomposition. Temperature influences nearly every stage of composting. During the first days after building a balanced pile, microbial populations multiply rapidly, generating heat. As easily digested materials become scarce, temperatures slowly decline, allowing different organisms, including fungi and earthworms, to continue the later stages of decomposition. This changing community of life is perfectly normal and reflects the natural succession occurring inside every healthy compost pile. Even well-managed compost sometimes develops problems. Fortunately, most have simple solutions. If the pile smells like rotten eggs or sour garbage, insufficient oxygen is usually the cause. Turning the pile and adding more dry brown materials often restores healthy conditions within days. If decomposition seems extremely slow, the pile may be too dry, too cold, too small, or lacking enough nitrogen-rich ingredients. Adding fresh green materials, checking moisture, and increasing pile size can restart microbial activity. If the pile appears soggy, mix in shredded cardboard, straw, or dry leaves to absorb excess moisture, while improving airflow. Fruit flies around fresh kitchen scraps usually indicate that food waste has been left exposed. Simply burying new scraps beneath several inches of brown material greatly reduces this problem. Rodents are almost always attracted by inappropriate ingredients rather than compost itself. Avoid meat, dairy, oily foods, and other animal products, and keep fresh kitchen scraps covered with carbon-rich materials. One lesson repeated by countless experienced home gardeners is that compost rarely fails because nature stops working. Most problems occur because one basic ingredient, oxygen, moisture, carbon, or nitrogen, has drifted out of balance. Restore that balance, and the pile usually recovers remarkably well. Knowing when compost is finished is just as important as knowing how to make it. Mature compost looks very different from the materials that created it. It becomes dark brown to nearly black, crumbly, and loose. Individual ingredients are difficult to recognize, except perhaps for a few small wood fragments. Most importantly, finished compost smells rich and earthy, much like healthy woodland soil after rainfall. It should never smell sour, rotten, or unpleasant. Once compost reaches this stage, it becomes one of the most versatile resources in the entire garden. Spread a layer across vegetable beds before planting to improve soil structure and gradually supply nutrients. Mix compost into flower beds to encourage healthier blooms and stronger root systems. Apply it around fruit trees as a mulch-like top dressing, keeping it slightly away from the trunk. Blend compost into potting mixes for containers, where it improves moisture retention and supports beneficial microorganisms. Thin layers spread over established lawns help improve soil biology beneath the grass without disturbing the turf. Perhaps the greatest value of compost isn't the nutrients it contains today but the living soil it helps create over many growing seasons. Healthy soil is far more than a collection of sand, silt, and clay particles. It is an enormous living ecosystem filled with bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes, insects, and earthworms, each performing countless tiny tasks that recycle nutrients, improve soil structure, retain moisture, and support healthy plant roots. Compost feeds this underground community, allowing the soil itself to become more resilient year after year. Gardeners often notice that soil enriched with compost becomes easier to dig, drains excess water more effectively during heavy rains, yet holds moisture longer during dry periods. Plants growing in healthy soil frequently develop stronger root systems, making them better able to withstand periods of drought and environmental stress. Perhaps the most satisfying part of composting is realizing that nature wastes almost nothing. Leaves become humus. Vegetable scraps become future harvests. Grass clippings become healthier soil. What once filled a trash bin returns to the garden as a valuable resource. The secret to outstanding compost has never been expensive equipment or complicated formulas. It comes from respecting the natural process of decomposition, balancing green and brown materials, maintaining the right moisture, providing oxygen, and allowing billions of tiny organisms to do the work they have perfected over millions of years. Every compost pile teaches patience, observation, and the remarkable efficiency of nature's recycling system. With each batch you create, you reduce waste, improve your soil, strengthen your garden, and build a healthier growing environment for seasons to come. Homemade compost remains one of the most sustainable, economical, and rewarding investments any gardener can make, turning everyday organic materials into the foundation of thriving plants, abundant harvests, and living soil that only gets better with time.